Insane Karen fat shames me after almost hitting me with her car, but then she gives me the perfect idea for revenge. This one happened a few years ago. Sometimes after my shifts, I walk down to a local grocery store to grab some snacks or lunches for the rest of the week. This particular day, I had effed up my knee pretty badly because I tripped on the ice. Gotta love those Canadian winters, eh? Anyway, I'm visibly in pain and limping quite noticeably. I have only one thing in mind: get in, get out, get on the bus, and play Halo until 3 a.m. That's all I want. Karen, though, she wanted me to be the Flash. Before I can really get into the story, you need to know something about me. Not only am I big in height, but also in size. It's a bit of a sore spot. Yeah, I know you're supposed to love yourself and all that, and I have learned to love myself. But when I'm picked on by strangers, it ticks me right the F off. Fun fact, trying to disregard what people think about you is hard. Anyway, I'm limping into this grocery store and going semi-slow since I'm wearing boots while trudging through deep snow and carrying a pretty heavy bag. That's when this speed demon in a white BMW whips through the parking lot after being stuck behind the grocery store delivery truck. The Beamer almost hits me, and since I'm not that far from the other cars, almost hits them too. It also kicks up quite a bit of snow, which only barely misses me. I let out a loud "what the F" and then finished my walk into the store. Well, maybe I was going slower than I realized, or this crazy BMW driver can teleport, because the lady was right behind me as I entered. Without entirely realizing she was the driver who nearly hit me, I tried to politely hold the door open for her. Karen did not appreciate the gesture. "Ah, move it, fatso! Christ, so slow! Can you move any slower?" I was, of course, upset. Like, what the heck, lady? Well, I saw my buddy shortly after. He noticed me limping and asked if I was okay. I was still kind of deflated from my Karen encounter, so I just said I was fine and moved on. I got my stuff and began to walk out when the universe saw fit to gift me with an opportunity for revenge. She was right behind me again. Now, funny thing about this store, there are 3 doors in the lobby. One is the main entrance, another with the security gate, and then the exit. Just like the entrance, the exit is a bit of a squeeze. So, Karen thinks I'm slow? I'll show her slow. I start really leaning hard into the limp, making a big production of how much my knee is hurting. It must have looked strange since I wasn't trying that hard to hide my smirk. Karen starts going ape. She can't go around me since they have cleaning carts for the night on my right, and the left would mean having to really squeeze right by me. And she obviously wasn't going to do that. Having to almost touch the fat guy? Oh no. Let alone just say excuse me. That would have been way too hard. She runs to the entrance door. Mind you, it's not a far walk out through the exit, even with me taking my time. Well, Karen whips the entrance gate open, except due to security, the entrance door doesn't open from this side. It only opens for you to enter, and was probably locked anyway since it was almost closing time. Is that a safety violation? Probably. But watching this speed demon try everything to get the door open was priceless. And then I really did it. I started walking the same speed I had been earlier, which was suddenly a much faster kind of slow in Karen's eyes. She was horrified. "What the heck?" she calls out. And I said, "Well, you asked if I could go any slower. It seems that I can." Her face was priceless. Her comments and body shaming did nothing to help her. She eventually managed to get out through the security gate. I have no idea how. I had stopped paying attention to her after getting my satisfaction. I just know because as I was leaving the lot, she was pulling out fast, running a red light and almost hitting another car. Now, I know the real question on your minds is, what does a Karen buy on a late-night grocery run that's so important she needs to be in a hurry? I don't know. It must have been candy, since that's the only aisle I saw her in while I was shopping. That was before COVID, but she did everything she could to keep 6 feet away from me. Guess she was worried my fat might be infectious. That kind of thing, unfortunately, isn't new to me. Only thing about this Karen that really surprised me was that her car was still intact after she was whipping around the ice like Lightning McQueen. The original poster clarified in the comments that this behavior is apparently pretty common among Canadian BMW drivers. They speed everywhere, without ever getting proper snow tires. I'd hope that, as true blue Canadians, they'd at least offer a sorry and a donut if they ever hit anyone. But that's not really how a Karen works. This hoser thinks the world revolves around her late-night candy purchases, like the world somehow owes her something every time she swings by the store for an Aero and a coffee crisp. Well, Karen, it doesn't. And if you're going to yell at a person for their size, don't act surprised when they decide to throw their weight around. But honestly, if she didn't care that the OP was limping, I seriously doubt she would have been any nicer to him if he'd weighed as little as 90 pounds. Or I guess 10 kilograms? Whatever crazy measurement they use up there. Work tries to tell me what makeup I'm allowed to wear, so I changed the rules using science. In the early 2000s, I worked at a Canadian casino. The place had so many ridiculous rules, including some very particular rules about makeup. The makeup rules were as follows: no fake eyelashes, no fake fingernails or fingernail extensions, no makeup that is not a natural color. The natural color one confused me. What is deemed natural? Who decides what is and isn't natural? I asked my manager for clarification, but she couldn't give me any. Just keep it natural. Use naturally occurring colors and you'll be fine. This did not sit well with me. I can't even explain why it bothered me so much. Rules should make sense, and if they don't make sense, they should be fixed. My aunt has her master's in environmental science. I went to her house one evening and picked her brain about naturally occurring colors. She informed me that, scientifically, naturally occurring colors are colors that can be found directly in nature. I guess I probably shouldn't have needed a college graduate to tell me that, but she did do one thing useful for me. She showed me a textbook that spoke directly on what exactly naturally occurring colors were. I borrowed the textbook and highlighted the paragraphs that specified this. Keep in mind this was well before you could just Google something. The only way to back up my claim was to carry that 750-page textbook to work with me. My next shift, I went all out. Green eyeliner, eggplant-colored eyeshadow, yellow nail polish on one hand, and mango-colored on the other hand. I hit the floor to work, and within the first few minutes, I get hauled into my manager's office. "What do you think you're doing? You cannot wear those colors. You know our policy states naturally occurring colors only when it comes to makeup. Head to the staff bathroom immediately and remove it." Wordlessly, I headed to the staff bathroom. But instead of taking the makeup off, I went to my locker, grabbed the textbook, and marched back to my manager's office. "Excuse me, manager? I am wearing naturally occurring colors. Here, look at this textbook that specifically states what naturally occurring colors are by definition." I watched her face change as she read the book. First, she looked annoyed, then worried, then finally resigned herself to what was happening. She asked me, "Do you really need to be that type of person?" "The type that follows the rules?" I asked. "I thought that's what you wanted me to do." She asked me to head back to the floor. For the remaining time I was employed there, I wore whatever color makeup I wanted, and so did almost all of my coworkers. They tried coming out with new rules, but could never get the wording right. Freaking stupid rules. This might be one of my favorite malicious compliance stories. This OP wasn't responding to some injustice or horrible new policy put in place by new owners. She literally just doesn't like rules. And while you might normally call that entitled, she actually did the work to back up her beliefs in a way that nobody could argue with them. That's pretty ingenious, and it's especially funny that they couldn't even come up with a way to put the rules back in place. If you can't justify a rule, then you probably don't need to have it. And unless business somehow suffered as a result of some woman wearing colorful makeup, they definitely didn't need to have this rule. But what's really great is that between this story and the first one, it seems that Canadians have a lot more snark than I gave them credit for. Let that be a lesson to anyone who thinks our ice-back neighbors to the north are all just maple syrupy and easygoing. Being polite doesn't make someone a doormat. Don't muck with a Canuck. It clearly doesn't go well. Idiot gas company tries to punish us for their mistakes. So we cut off fuel production for half the population. This story happened in the 90s with a major oil and gas provider in Australia. We'll call this mob Company X. The main star of the tale is my workmate, who we'll call Jono. He worked for a contracting company which deals with servicing equipment for Company X. Like many other industries, Company X contracted out a lot of their jobs to numerous service providers. Many of these providers mobilized office staff to the major field facilities provided by Company X. Upon winning contracts from Company X, service providers either build office buildings on Company X's land or move into existing buildings that Company X already owns. This is important knowledge for later. Back in the 90s, there was a massive push for safer work conditions. With the push, new safety staff were hired by Company X. If you've worked with some of these health and safety guys before, it won't surprise you that the clipboard warriors at Company X were hired on with the mentality that they would change the entire industry with an iron fist. Providers would do things their way, or else forfeit the terms of the contract and get the boot. When these safety guys came in, they started shaking up every nook and cranny. The first service provider had their operations shut down for 2 weeks due to a lack of operational guidelines. The second company was told their building was a fire hazard and their chemical storage was a mess. It took 3 weeks to get it fixed before the service provider could get back up and running. Fast forward to Jono and the provider he worked for. At this point, safety was on a roll, making the whole industry safe at the cost of the service provider's sanity and work hours. The clipboard warriors were pretty much just throwing their weight around for everyone else to catch. During a 2-week safety audit of Jono's company, the auditor had developed a multiple-item checklist of things that they found wrong with other service providers. During the whole 2-week audit, Jono's company was hit with pretty much everything on the list. Problems with the building, with chemical storage, and with so many menial items that the auditor brought in Company X's safety head to speak with Jono and his manager about the sorry state of their workplace. They pretty much told Jono and his manager that if they didn't get it all changed and fixed up, they would lose the contract for allowing unsafe work conditions. Jono was pretty much losing his bollocks at this point. He didn't know where to start on this insane list, and it was holding up their work. But his manager took the list and read through it, then handed it back to the safety auditor with a massive grin on his face. He said, "This is Company X's building. They own the workplace and all facilities therein. We are just renting. Since you started your safety audit 6 months ago, I've been making requests to Company X's upper management, asking them to upgrade the facilities. But these requests were to no avail. They pushed back. Now that we have to shut down due to Company X's refusal to provide a safe workplace, we will have to stop servicing equipment that maintains the operation of over 500 gas wells, effectively shutting down over 50% of all gas production in this area." Note that Company X was, and still is, a major natural gas provider. If there was a potential risk of losing 50% of all gas production, someone at Company X was going to get the boot over it. So naturally, the safety manager was a bit deflated and didn't really have anything to say. The auditor replied with, "We will have to come back and research the conditions of your lease agreement before we can continue." But that, of course, was just wasting time. The repairs fell on Company X in the end, and it took them a full month to fix everything in Jono's workplace. Jono's company pretty much got away scot-free, neither performing nor paying for the repairs. There must have been a massive meeting or something, because the safety auditors started prioritizing every building that belonged to Company X and leaving the service providers alone. That was a really gutsy move on the part of Jono's manager. It might almost sound cruel for them to threaten the fuel production for half the area, but Company X was really asking for it in this case. They basically tried to use their safety regulations to force providers to do repairs on their own buildings. And it sounds like, up until they messed with the wrong company, it was working. If this company was really reckless enough to jeopardize an entire population's gas and oil needs, then somebody probably deserves to get fired anyway. They probably won't, but at least they'll think twice the next time they think they can take advantage of their contractors. Cheap boss denies me a raise and then wants my help over a decade later. Too bad his own threats against me made it impossible to help him. Many years ago, I worked for a little company. Our CEO was a miser of the first order. We needed image hosting for a large client account, and the CEO was unwilling to pay for what maybe would have come out to $2,000 to $3,000 in annual image hosting fees at the time. I was extremely frustrated by this refusal, especially since the company was making millions off our deal with this client. But me being an enterprising individual, I figured out a way to host the images on Flickr. I saved the login information in a physical notebook, and I kept informing the company that this temporary solution was a house of cards, and that we really needed to switch to a professional service. Several months later, I was promoted, and I asked for a raise to go with my promotion. The CEO said no, which was a deal breaker since all promotions and raises require the CEO's sign-off. I tried negotiating, but the CEO held his ground and told me I could leave if I didn't like it. So I left. The CEO was a bit miffed about that. He warned me to forget about everything related to the company and threatened to sue me if I did anything with the client accounts, whether stealing clients or trying to sabotage company deals. Fine. I told him I'd leave all my knowledge behind in the notebook containing the Flickr password, as well as one final email to both the CEO and my manager. In this email, I provided a full inventory of what I left behind. This included invoices, contracts, etc. I also reminded them in this email that I had left behind a personal notebook of account notes and reference materials, including the image hosting logins for our major client. In all caps, I concluded this entry, "Keep for reference." Well, I recently received a LinkedIn message from the CEO, telling me to help them with my old accounts or he'll sue me. Apparently, Flickr changed their terms of service, and the images were deleted. In over 10 years, nobody updated any documentation or moved the image hosting to a professional service. Apparently, they also didn't bother checking the email account used for the Flickr login. Despite multiple warnings from me, they let the accounts languish for 10 years. It's absolutely insane. I don't even work for these people anymore, and their ignorance is still frustrating. Yet the CEO's request for help? Oh, that was satisfying. I told the CEO that I cannot help. Per his request, I forgot everything I knew about his company, and anything I knew was in that notebook I left him over 10 years ago. And honestly, despite throwing his own words back at him, it wasn't really a lie. I don't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning. He thought I'd remember technical details from over a decade ago? Don't make me laugh. This OP's boss really thinks he can make people do whatever he wants just by threatening to sue. What kind of person threatens to sue someone if they don't forget everything they know, then later threatens to sue that same person for not remembering what they used to know? This CEO is so ridiculously focused on controlling people, he can't even keep track of all the threats he's made. Also, this company had 10 years to figure out a solution to a minor problem that could cost them millions of dollars in profits if it wasn't solved. Even if the CEO doesn't care about his employees, which he clearly doesn't, you'd think he'd at least care enough about his money to make sure he didn't lose profits over something as stupid as a Flickr account. Maybe if the OP had helped him, he could have talked his way into finally getting that raise. But would it be worth it if it meant working for a company that obviously doesn't respect up? How would you handle the situation? Let us know in the comments down below. Click one of the videos on screen right now.